Welcome everybody to the Tridion Docs 15.3 Bootcamp. This session is about the Content Manager and the OpenAPI. The agenda for the session is the platform. So which platforms are we allowed to run and what kind of third parties tools are we using? Installation and upgrade process, with the database, what kind of fixes we did, something about the fields and privileges, also an update on access management, also got a new release from it. About the OpenAPI, what we did for it and how it is available. Something about translations, the metrics, and we will end with is deploy, is remote, and finally also have an overview of all the community ideas we implemented in this release. First one is about the platform and support cycle. So as you probably know, in the old days, everything was like very long-lived, especially if you look at, for example, .NET Framework 4.8 is there forever almost indeed. But also the updates come very slowly, also only with a major release of the platform, and the platform of Microsoft takes years, 5-10 years sometimes. And also that also will not actually have a high cadence in releasing features. So as you currently also see for .NET, they also use new kind of cadence for .NET Core, and the recycle is about 3 years. And not all the Microsoft is doing it, but Oracle is doing it as well. So have like smaller release cycles, but also the support fit is also is shorter as well. And we follow basically that paradigm. As you also can see, like Tridion Docs 14 SP4 was a very long time release. If you compare that to the 15 and 15.1, they're pretty smaller as a sports cycle. And we actually have that scenario as well for the 15.2, but also for the upcoming 15.3 as well. So if you look currently at the Tridion Docs releases, that you can actually see like the 14 SP4 and earlier, it's already retired, something like the end of 2024. But you see is for the 15 and the 15.1, they are fully supported until July 2026, so that is this year, and the 15.2 will, the release or the support for it will end on July 28, and the upcoming release for the 15.3 will start probably this year. Hopefully, will release in June. Could be a little bit later, and also will be fully supported for about 3 years, and that will then end on July 2029. If you look at what kind of things we introduce. We're going to introduce a new feature that's called Publication Editor. I don't explain nothing actually about it, but there's a dedicated session about it, publication, what it is. So please will watch that session about Publication Editor. For the growth and maturity, so I actually moved the OpenAPI to that one. So it was already released in previous version, but we actually enhanced it with a couple of extra endpoints. On the deprecation list, there's still the secure token service and the web service for the SOAP, and that is actually using that old authentication mechanism for WSTARS and WS Federation, and that will be deprecated still, so it will be becoming obsolete in a next version. And on the obsolete side, we have an internal API. We call it XAPI, and that was used by DrawSpace and ReviewSpace, and we removed that one. And Smart Logic has SOAP integration. They deprecated that one, or it is obsolete on their side. So also removed it from our installation as well, the Smart Logic SOAP integration. On the Windows servers, where we actually install Tridion Docs, nothing has changed. So we still support Windows 2025 and Windows 2022. And the older versions, they're not supported for this release, for Tridion Docs 15.3 release. On SQL Server, so SQL Server released a new version of their product, SQL Server 2025, and we gonna support, or we are supporting that one as well in the 15.3 release. And we're also still supporting SQL Server 2022. So our policy is that we only support the last 2 major versions of SQL Server, and so that means that SQL Server 2019 for this release is now not supported, but also the other 4 older versions as well not supported related to SQL Server. For Oracle, nothing has changed, so we still only support one version, that's Oracle 19c. So you see on the not support list is Oracle 23 AI, so we don't have a real good platform to test it on. So that's, we haven't done our validation on it, so that's why it's on the not supported. For Solar, so we'll bump the Solar version. So it's now actually 9.10.1 that we're going to release. So you don't need to re-index. It's just a major or upgrade on the platform for Solar. For the translation system, nothing has changed. So for TMS, we still support the 12 version. For World Server is the 11th version, but we also still support Tridion Enterprise. On the .NET framework, there is a change in that area that we now require the .NET 10 hosting bundle. So the previous version was .NET 8, but now we actually moved to .NET 10. And still for the old bit of legacy stuff that we currently have, like I mentioned like SSTS, for example, that is still using .NET Framework 4.8. So we don't actually run all the versions of the .NET Framework. For Java also released a couple of, or a new version, that's the 25. So that's the one we support together with the 21. So with our policy only supporting the last two major versions, that means like the Oracle Java 17, but also the Adoptium Turum 17 are also now on the list of not supported. For the browser policy, nothing has changed. So we still support Microsoft Edge, Chrome, and Firefox, but also indeed the latest versions. So you have to follow the update channel from those browsers. Not supported, the old Microsoft browsers. On the configuration, quick start settings. So compared to the 15.2, nothing has changed. So in that sense, you don't have to make modifications to get the product working. For the platforms components, so if you do an installation of the product, you can actually see some different kind of web applications running on the IIS. And so not a lot of change. So we actually bumped up the version for the .NET Core. That's now 10 instead of 8. And also, that's indeed on this side. So you don't see any changes. Like I said, it's only moving to .NET 10. And we actually have make a change. So the OWF SOAP web service that is also now re-platformed. So instead of using the full framework, now we're actually targeting .NET 10. So that is one of the changes that is visible and noticeable when you do an installation. If you look at the overview of what kind of technology is used for those application pools, and for the rest, everything just remains the same. From an architecture point of view, so still we follow the same principle. So it's highly available through stateless design. So we actually allow auto-scaling with other with web applications, but also you can also have like a background service that does more like the heavy lifting on the background task. So that's still there. And also, we fully support still the auto recovery. Is something fails, everything is just stored in the database, and we can actually recover from state. So the services themselves are stateless. This is like another overview for the platform. They can actually see also what is .NET 4.8 and what is .NET 10. And also on this, compared to the previous version, you can actually see that the database upgrade tool is also moved to .NET 10, and also like the OWF SOAP web service and that OpenAPI are both actually now hitting the .NET 10. So there are only like a couple of services that are still running Windows .NET 4.8. And as you also can see in the ACMs, we also removed the XAPI from it. So it's only currently using like static file handling. So there's no real processing logic there anymore. This is basically another overview. So this will actually target how we, for the 15.3 release. So the picture still shows the old version like it currently is. With is remote, they can actually see it's using something. Indeed, can also be on the ASMX, but also on the WCF endpoint as well. And you can also see for the client tools in is remote, for the version 4.8 from is remote, they actually hook up to that OWCF web service, and that is it supports model authentication instead of the WS Trust and WS Federation. And the OpenAPI is mainly using, or the OpenAPI space is mainly using indeed the OpenAPI, but still there are some other products that are still indeed using XAPI. So if you look at this picture, you actually see it changing, that the WCF service related to model authentication changed from full framework to the .NET Core. That's why it is blue. So as you currently, when we started the 15.3, that was the situation. So it's organized space that was fully connected to the OpenAPI, but with draw space, review space, and a new one like publication editor. That was actually a mix of, started to be a mix of the OpenAPI, but also still using XAPI. So the majority of the calls are still using XAPI, and that has that special web application. And we left a bit on from the previous version, like the MVC for organized space, but also the foundation on the surface. While we were really not using it, it was still there. We didn't have time to remove it. So for the 15.3, we had some time, so we removed it. So the whole foundation of the server and MVC is gone now. And we even went a step further. So we really removed XAPI. There's no XAPI there anymore. So we also removed the whole application itself as well. So there's nothing there that actually is an application. Like I said, it's only serving static files at the moment. And then indeed we rewired organized space, draw space, review space, and publication editor to only use the OpenAPI. So that is one of the major things we achieved as well on the technical side in the background. Like I said, so one of the services, like the SOAP web services, model authentication, we re-platformed it. So it's now using .NET 10. And also, if you look at it as well, so there's no web config anymore. It's replaced by app settings. And before, the web config has a huge amount of configuration settings, and we simplified it to have way less configuration there. And also what you notice there, the connection configuration, that XML is no longer a file on disk, but it's actually an endpoint that is still available if you hit it by the browser. But it is generated, and it will return the same format as the previous version. And all of that is basically retrieved from the app settings. And then there's your discovery options in there. We actually expose this kind of information in that connection configuration XML if you hit that endpoint. And the whole app settings to JSON is properly set with the right URLs doing the installation. This is about XAPI. So the internal API that was mainly used by draw space and review space is removed. And we actually ported all the functionality to the OpenAPI, but not everything is included what we did in the public OpenAPI. And draw space and review space are now wired indeed to the internal OpenAPI, and what is different between the public and the internal. I will come back to that one later. But also that means we have to indeed replace some files as well. If you were looking at an installation, a lot of the folder configuration about the normalization and the navigated title generation were actually stored in the web.config, where actually XAPI was hosted. But we needed to find another home because that web.config no longer exists, and that we come up with a solution that we actually stored on the collector spaces config custom settings. There is also the behavior config, for example. And we have now two new files. It's the nav title generation configuration and the XML normalization configuration. And both of them are actually updated when you run the set is fonto schema experience is deploy commandlet. So depending on what you have configured in the behavior config, if you run that commandlet, it will generate the right settings in the nav title generator config, but also the XML normalization config. In the web config of the previous one of XAPI, there was also some links as well to the Fonto services, because the Fonto services are also acting more or less as a website. And now they actually are stored in the app settings of the OpenAPI. If you look in that one, you can actually find it on an installation. And then, one of the features that also XAPI had, it is also an endpoint for a sidebar. And the sidebar is basically an application that is hooked up into the draw space or review space, where customer can implement their own kind of little application. So by default, it's only like we call from the Raspberry space, we basically hit one endpoint is an HTML page. And if you actually write an event listener and just and we post a message, and a message is basically the XML of the selected document, and we'll send to it, and then you can actually do whatever you would like. And for that one, we basically had a default one, so customers can actually test it. Hey, does it work, and how does it look like? How should I do it? So we actually had an example. So we basically have to come up with a new one as well. So we provided out of the box now a new example that will work, but does not no longer use basically this XAPI endpoint. But when we all started this whole sidebars, the thought was basically that we actually only call like an external link and basically call that particular endpoint, that HTML endpoint, and we post that message, and people can do whatever they would like, even outside of our system as well. So it does not have to be hosted on Tridion Docs itself. But people were very creative. So they actually created a sidebar that does not communicate with Tridion Docs, but also they implemented sidebars that will actually communicating with Tridion Docs. But if you communicate with Tridion Docs itself, like with an API, you need some kind of authentication mechanism. And that's why people got creative and create basically a sidebar extension that are actually put in the XAPI web application. And then XAPI could handle basically that web application, took care about the whole authentication mechanism, and hence also the application calling back to Tridion Docs itself will lift on this whole authentication mechanism, and that the right user and could access basically our API. But yeah, that is no longer the case. So we thought as well, so how can actually help as well implementers writing new kind of sidebars. So out of the box, we deliver an example. An example is can be found in the resources code, but it's basically the source code. So in order not to force people to compile it in order to view how it's going to look like, if you put an example. We also put them on the CD as well in the resources add-on sidebar example. So you actually can copy those two files and copy them to the InfoShare data add-ons repository. And then actually they will be picked up once you open draw space or review space, but also indeed modify the web configuration as well. And this is basically the behavior config where you can actually configure those sidebar extensions. So currently we have a draw space for a draw space example, but also one for review space, but also publication editor. That is indeed a new one. And depending on the client name, you can actually display yes or no. So you can have basically one kind of sidebar you can configure, and you can actually decide on which kind of client name you want to display it. So it's basically like an is condition. You can specify, hey, I want to only do it on draw space. They can actually remove those other tools and that only be visible in draw space. But then indeed you saw the URL. So how do you think you can actually figure out the URL itself on a new way, how we can actually write those sidebar extensions? So the URL is basically a bit fixed. So you have your host name and then ECS and the draw space, review space, of organized space, and then extensions, UI extensions, repository. That one is more or less always fixed. And then you have the sidebar example. That's basically the name of your sidebar, and that is basically described in a manifest file of your extension. And then indeed the page itself is also coming from this kind of files, and then you can actually link it together and create the right URL if you want to develop your own one. But also there's other options as well. So when you actually created your whole add-on and package it correctly and put it in the repository folder, and then you also have a website where you can actually see your all your APIs that you have developed in that extension. And there's one endpoint that's called extensions. If you select this one, it will actually generate you a response. In the response, you can actually figure out all the content, how it can be consumed by another kind of application. And from here, you can actually copy it, this particular link and put it in your behavior configuration as the URL of your sidebar. Then of course, they're all static files. So you have some JavaScript, some HTML, but then of course you want to test it as well. And then you also run security scans. We run them as well. And then we found, hey, there are some ways we can actually make it even better, because it was highlighted as a security incident with, it could be better. And that we thought about how can we actually help everybody. So not only indeed for the new sidebar, but also for the existing organized space extensions as well. So by default, we actually set some default security headers, but you are able actually to override them. But then you have to do something extra as well. So by default, we will make it more secure. So also the browser is not complaining about it. So by default, we set some static security headers. There's something about indeed the content security policy and a couple of other ones as well. And for the HTML files, we set different ones. And the headers for all the other files, we actually kept the same default as for the static files. So how they can actually override those default ones. So in the manifest file, we allow a new section that is called custom headers, and they can actually specify in a path filter for which kind of files you want to change the header. And then with the headers, you can actually specify in new options what you want to change it compared to the default one. And from here, we actually have the property names, what you can set, and that correspond to a particular HTTP header, and also a bit of a description what you can actually change as well, what it's supposed to do. So, and then you also, you have it running, everything is secure, but if you want to see why we actually did it, why we actually have hosted on our extensions, like the same as organized space extension, it's all about the security mechanism. So by default, if you load something like a draw space, review space, and organized space, you basically hit that application. That application does the validation. It will, if you not log in, it will force you to an IDP. It will try to push to an IP, log in, and then indeed continue with loading your whole application. And then if you load the application, you actually make a call to our OpenAPI. And in that way, we actually also does some exchanging as well. So the browser itself, it's only sending cookies, and we actually exchange a cookie for a bearer token. And that's why you can actually use the OpenAPI because it only allows bearer tokens, and they can actually return your HTML, JavaScript, and other kind of data in your normal web application like JavaSpace. But as soon as you now hit a sidebar, it also makes a request as well. So that's why it's very important that you also have in your URL of this particular extension, if you're using this mechanism that we're currently describing. Because of sending the cookie, it's only indeed valid for a particular application. So if you load the sidebar, we also exchange the cookie with a bearer token. And then we hit basically this extension, and that will also return you the HTML. And then indeed, if you want to have a callback, so you want to have some useful information for on Tridion Docs, you can from that HTML page in the sidebar, you also make a request to indeed, like for example, like draw space. They also exchange your cookie for bearer token, and then you hit basically your add-on with indeed the bearer token, and then we actually do the authentication for you, and then in your basically your backend part of your sidebar, they can actually use the API 25, and they can actually do whatever you want, and then it also returns you the JSON as well, and then you can actually display the end result of that in your sidebar. So if you're lucky and you have created a nice extension or installed it, then indeed we deliver 2 of them, and the first one you see is basically doesn't call back. If you open it indeed for draw space or review space, it will display you the number of annotations or comments in your whole publication. So that is something, it's not there by default, so we have to do something on the background, and that's why you actually see this demo sidebar. Annotations overview, that is called for in order to display it. And the other one is just like a basic one. It just displays whatever kind of object you have selected in or document you have selected in your publication, it will display basically the XML content from it. Indeed, and yeah, like I said, so there's new is condition there as well, and now we actually supporting the new publication editor as well. Like I said, there's also this different bootcamp session about it. Please watch it. And then we also support in this behavior config like a client and can be publication editor, build a component editor, or single component editor. What's the difference is also explained in this new bootcamp session about the publication editor. That's it for the sidebar. Then my Andriy will continue with the installation upgrade process.
Thank you, Ivo. So indeed, let me continue and cover installation and upgrade process. So if you are doing a fresh installation of Tridion Docs 15.3, so you need to first restore Content Manager database and then create databases using PowerShell script, that is access management database, backend or frontend database, Tridion Docs Identity Provider, and metrics. In case you are doing upgrade, and if your current version is Tridion Docs 15.0, you need to upgrade Content Manager database using database upgrade tool, upgrade access management with PowerShell scripts, and you need to create metric database using PowerShell scripts. In case you are upgrading either from 15.1 version or 15.2 version, you need to upgrade Content Manager database using database upgrade tool and upgrade access management and metric databases using PowerShell scripts. And please make sure that .NET 10 hosting bundle is installed and the database upgrades are supported starting from version 2016 SP4. So list of databases remains the same for 15.3 version as it was in previous version. So it's IshCM, that is for Tridion Docs Content Manager, IshAM for access management, IshID for Tridion Docs Identity Provider, IshBFF for backend or frontend service that holds user session data, and IshMT for metrics. This information is more for database admins and 15.3 SQL Server database users per each database remains the same as in previous 15.2 version, so the same deployment database user as well as a runtime database user. For Oracle database users, the situation is the same, so they remain the same as for previous 15.2 version, so same deployment database user and same runtime database user. Required install tool parameters for installation remains the same for Tridion Docs 15.3 as they were for previous 15.2 version. So you can continue to use your install tool parameters as they were in previous version. So let's also continue with database upgrade tool changes. So as part of Tridion Docs 15.3 version, the database upgrade tool was upgraded to .NET 10. So we also updated a set of commands to support database upgrades in our cloud deployments because we need them to be platform independent and do not use the Windows registry. So first of all, the previous way of running upgrades command with input parameters is still supported. So what we did, we removed a legacy application name parameter because previously when the base upgrade tool was using VB6, it was used, but after the migration of the database upgrade tool to .NET full framework, each deployment name parameter was used underneath, and yeah, if even application name was specified, we were skipping that one. So as a result, we decided to remove application name from the upgrade command. And instead of application name, customers need to use each deployment name parameter, but only if they have more than one installation on the environment. And most of our customers have a single deployment, so they can skip each deployment name parameter. For Tridion Docs, we support an alternative way of running upgrade command with required parameters that are connection string, that is a connection string to the database path, that is a full path to the database upgrade tool plan, and each deployment name. So it's a name of deployment, and it is a required parameter compared to the input parameters variant that you can use for upgrade command. So it is required, and it should be specified when you're using it together with connection string. We also introduced a new optional parameter, copy to history folder, that is indicates whether the upgrade log and upgrade tool plan should be copied to the history folder. So it is used in our cloud deployments. We are not copying this files to the history folder, which is why by default to keep the on-premise installation as is, by default it is set to true. And yeah, you can see an examples of usage for upgrade command with input parameters without application name, and example with connection string where each deployment name is a required parameter. So we also updated other commands to have an alternative way of usage without parameters that require access to the Windows registry. So an alternative way to call setup command without specifying an application name, and where you can use connection string and path. An alternative way to call full export command without specifying an application name. Sorry, forgot to click, where you can use connection string and a path. And alternative way to call terminate active database upgrade without specifying path to the input parameters, where you can use a connection string. So as said, so let's continue with the base improvements that we did for as part of the Tridion Docs 15.3. So a set of database improvements were implemented with a focus on the performance improvements. So as a result of the change on the database layer for Microsoft SQL Server, the performance for retrieving multiple objects, either using logical IDs or card IDs, has improved for our public APIs. So it's for API 2.5 and OpenAPI. And as a result, client applications like organized space, collective spaces, publication manager and others benefit from this change. So let me do a quick summary of the change that we did. So when two or more objects are queried, we're using SQL Server type safe OpenJSON construction. It does not use temp table, temp database, and has better throughput and performance consistency compared to temp database. We also saw many cached query plans that had a difference only in string length, and the reason for that was concatenated identifiers that was passed to an varchar string. So in case, as an example, so in case you have requesting similar folders lists with a different set of topics, as a result, you would have two different cached query plans. So to reduce the amount of cached query plans, we now fix the value for this varchar string to 4000. We also added one more field query optimizer hint for card values, in addition to already existing ones for string values and card values, and domain values. And also a SQL query that is used to return a location of document object and other queries that apply security. They will also use OpenJSON construction that is more performance efficient, and also we removed an unnecessary card table join. And these changes are also available in Tridion Docs 15.2.2. So let's move on. So this is not a common use case, but when you are trying to delete a user that is referenced, you will get an exception in organized space without details that helps you to define the list of items that are referencing the user. So what we did, we added a procedure that can be used to get the list of objects that are referencing the user. So you can use it in Tridion Docs 15.3. So let's cover the new fields that we added as part of the 15.3 version. So fish enable composer. So it is used on the configuration card to indicate whether composer that is actually publication editor is enabled or not, and composer is a project name. And fish latest version that is used on the logical level card types to store the highest version of the document object. And fish latest version is used in publication editor baseline view to indicate whether a new version is available for the baseline entries. Let's cover privileges. So let me do a quick reminder that privileges first were introduced as part of 15.0 version and allows to determine whether the certain functionality is available for a group of users, and you can set privileges on the user roles. So as part of 15.3 version, we are introducing a new privilege called annotation management privilege that determines whether user is allowed to view and manage all annotations. So user with such privilege should be able to read shared comments and unshared comments of all users, and should be able to delete resolved comments, and user without privilege is able to read his/her comments and shared comments only. And this is an overview table of all privileges that are available as part of 15.3 version, and with a new annotation management privilege. And with this I would like to hand over to you for access management.
Yeah, thank you, Andriy. So let's continue about access management and the changes that we made. So authentication is still in security, still always a hot topic, and over time things are getting more and more secure. So currently, if you're using authentication for Pixie, it still sends some settings data from the browser as part of a new route to your identity provider. And with a new mechanism, it's called push authorization request. That's no longer the case. So basically on the back channel, all since the data is first sent to the authentication or to the identity provider, you get basically a reference to that bit of sensitive data back, and that actually reference is actually part of the URI. So it's getting harder and harder to actually temper the request. It also requires a new endpoint as well. So for access management, there's a new one for ISAM connect to PAR, and it's a post request. So if you are behind a firewall and you're really strict on it, and you only indeed before used to have GET requests, so now at least you have one post request in order to enable this this new feature. And by default, we're still using authentication code with Pixie, but you can actually change this as well in Access Manager for all the applications. So there's now a new one, authorization code flow with Pixie and PAR. Of course, with every improvement, there's also sometimes indeed a downside as well. So the downside of using PAR, that you only have like 10 minutes to log in. So normally it goes very fast, but if you just hit your identity provider, go for a cup of coffee, come back and then try to log in, then maybe your session timed out in that sense. So be aware of it that, you only have 10 minutes to log in, but you can change this setting as well. So less is more secure, of course, but if you need more time, you can actually tweak that setting, but I will show you later where you can do that. Also, access management has now also a new role as well. So before you only had administrator, but now you have the a read-only role. And with that read-only role, you can actually view all the settings in access management. So all the applications, also the identity providers. But like really, if it contains something like a client secret, it's not visible for if you have the read-only role. And of course, you can still modify your language and regional settings if you have this role. So only for yourself, but not for other users, but you still can see all the other users. Another fix that is made to access management is related to Amazon Cognito. So if you use that one as your identity provider, it did not actually follow the OpenID Connect specifications. It has their own implementation of it. So we actually fixed that issue. So it's actually fixed in access management. So in order to fix it, there is a property there we call it like end session endpoint. They can actually specify then in your identity provider in access management. And then you actually have to set a placeholder there. Something it's called a sign out ODDC. And when we actually do a logout, we actually replace it, this logout URI with the right one from access management. But also we actually put a redirect URL cookie. And that redirect URL cookie is then read indeed from that Cognito, and hence the whole authentication flow is nicely there. So yeah, that's a fix that we actually made in access management to support the Amazon Cognito redirect logout. So this is a bit about the authentication lifetime of all the different kind of applications that we currently have. And I was indeed talking about the federation gateways, access management, and there you see the cookie lifetime. And then we added something like the push authorization lifetime. So by default, it's there for 10 minutes. But indeed, if you need more time, you can actually change it in this setting. So that is compared to 15.2. That's the only difference compared to all the lifetime of all those cookies and access tokens as well. So that is the only difference that we made. Then we continue with the OpenAPI. So with the OpenAPI, we actually have a way to allow customers to integrate with our product. So they actually can call our product from the application. So we don't deliver libraries for all the kind of languages, indeed for Java or Python or for .NET. No, we follow basically the OpenAPI specifications, and with the specification, you can actually generate a client. So it's easy to use as well for your particular application, and that can indeed, like I said, Python, .NET or Java. It doesn't really matter anymore. And it is publicly available, this one, and also functional, complete compared to the WCF SOAP web service that is also still there at the moment. So the OpenAPI we also use internally as well. So also indeed for our organized space, but also now for draw space and review space as well. And we actually generate that one. So we use React and TypeScript, and we actually generate a TypeScript library from the OpenAPI specification, and we use that basically in our React application. So we also test it ourselves as well. So like I said before, there are two versions of the OpenAPI. There's the Info Share API internal, and that one is used by organized space, draw space, review space. And they're actually not supported by customer applications. So if you write your own application, please use the Info Share API v3. That is the public one, and that is supported, and that is for customer applications. The reason why you have a difference between the internal and the v3. So internal, we have a lot of maybe tweaks to get indeed good performance on OpenAPI or for organized space or draw space, but we're not really sure if it's like a stable endpoint. Maybe it needs some tweaking. And in order to guarantee more or less background compatibility, we first want to test this as well. And maybe over time we can actually see, hey, we want to actually promote this internal API to a public one. So also your client-side application can benefit from it as well. There's already like a community video as well from a previous bootcamp on the 51, how actually to create a custom application with using the OpenAPI and also the authentication as well. So yeah, like I said, you can find it on the community if you're interested in building your own application. And there's a lot of endpoints indeed on the OpenAPI. And yeah, this one is for the annotation application and background task. And yeah, like you see in 15.3, we have added one and that is for getting the background task content. Yeah, this basically table gives you an overview when it was introduced, in which version, what kind of endpoint. Yeah, for the baseline endpoints, in this one, nothing is changed. And we added basically one extra baseline endpoint for the cat publication list using the baseline. That one is new in 15.3. There's a new one for conditions. So you're also able to use conditions. So get document objects using a condition name or a condition value. You can also use it now in the 15.3 version of the OpenAPI. There's still a lot of document object endpoints. In that sense, there's nothing's changed in the 15.3. There's nothing added. What is new is the electronic document types. It's a new endpoint, and it's basically will support the CRUD, so the list, create, read, update, and delete of them. Events endpoints, they actually, nothing has changed, nothing added in that one. The same for the folder. And for the inbox list of values, metadata binding, there's also nothing added to it. And the same applies basically for the my object output format endpoints. They nothing new. The same for the project endpoints. There's also no new endpoint. Also for the publications, nothing is added there. It's quite a list of publication endpoints. And then we have the search and the settings endpoints. In the setting endpoints, there's one extra now. That's actually getting the source languages. So that also helps you indeed if you want to translate something. So you can also what is the supported source languages. And then of course, with translation DOP and translation template. Also from that point of view, there's nothing added. And also for user groups and roles, no new endpoints are added. Also user variable and workflow, they remain the same, except we have a new one indeed for variables. So we can actually call the get documents using this particular variable and give you a nice list of all the documents as well. So that is new in 15.3. And then we have all list, and you seen that in previous bootcamps as well. So currently we have parity, but of course they might have extra requests for more endpoints because we also added new features to the product as well. So over time, probably it will evolve and we get more and more endpoints. But basically you see the number of the SOAP web services 2011, and currently the v3 REST one is 194. We have feature parity, but some endpoints we actually combine. So that's why the number is not really the same. But functionality wise, you can actually do the same now with the v3 REST one compared to the SOAP API. We make one change. So previously we have also a multi-filter fields, and you can actually specify multi filters, but we only took the first one. So we make the modification now for a fix that we can actually do multiple filters, and they actually will follow all the filters. So it's now possible for an illustration to get multiple languages as well. So this is basically a screenshot how you can actually define it. In previous that was not possible, but now you can actually do it. OpenAPI documentation. So the OpenAPI documentation will be available on the developers.rws.com on the 15.3, and there is a section will be updated with right links. If you click on the link, you get the whole specification of the OpenAPI. This will finish the OpenAPI section, and I will give the word back to Andriy to talk about translation services.
Thank you, Ivo. So indeed, as Ivo mentioned, let me continue with translation services and updates and improvements for translation services. So first, let's talk about improvements for translation jobs list mechanism. So just to give you a bit of a background, so why this mechanism exists. So there are two main things why we have it. So the same translation job is not, so to make sure that the same translation job is not processed by multiple translation organizer services. And for this particular case, there is also a list tag in the translation job itself. And secondly, to make sure that only one translation job is sent for translation at the same time. And this is done to avoid creation of multiple translation jobs on the translation management system side. So to handle these cases, translation job list actually exists in XML settings area. And previously, when canceling long-running translation job, this tag was not cleared properly. And as a result, it was blocking translation process. And that since the next a new translation job cannot be sent for translation, there was a manual workaround how you can clear that list tag and fix an issue. And now we improved the business code, and that is now correctly clearing the send list. So We also improved cancellation of translation job because previously translation services were used to continue processing the translation job even if the user cancelled it. And in Tridion Docs, we monitor the status of translation job, and in case the status is cancelled, the operation is stopped. We also reduce the processing time for the system for the cases when there are no items to translate. So because previously it was handled by two regular steps approach that we had where we are using separate background tasks. So first to expand and create target objects, and second to send for translation and retrieve them back. Now when expand returns 0 items to translate, we do not trigger second step background task and finish the process. As a result of this change, such translation jobs will have a final status completed and not export completed as it was before. And this also, as you probably got from the difference in the statuses, it's also including the file system translation template. And on the screen you can see previously this is amount of events that we were processing before in 15.2, and after the change, in case no item to translate, this is the amount of events that we are processing now. So we improved robustness for Translation Builder because in previous versions of the product, Translation Builder service was it stops if the connection to the content manager database is lost. In Tridion Docs 15.3, for the same situation, Translation Builder, like other services of Tridion Docs, continues working, and it logs warning to the log. But once connection is restored, service continues operate normally. We also updated translation organizer settings, so we increased the default request amount to 10 minutes. It is used when translation organizer is communicating with API 2.5 endpoints, for example, when translations are being imported back. Let me also cover translation job export file name changes. So we changed the format of the export edit file name for translation job that is using file system translation template. So as you can see, we appended logical ID of the translation job at the end, and now also using equals as a separator. And all this is to simplify parsing logic for the file names by custom external translation management solutions. Let's continue with metrics feature and see a set of changes that we made for the metrics feature to support database server migration, filter out actions that do not contribute to metrics, and other changes as well. And first we will start with import-export process for metrics database. So usually this process is done when content manager and metrics database are migrated to a newer database server. And the reason why customers are migrating their databases to a newer database server usually is in context of the upgrade process of Tridion Docs system. And yeah, usually this is the case when platform matrix between the older and newer Tridion Docs versions doesn't match. However, this is not the only one reason of migrating database to another database server. So to support migration process for metrics for Oracle database, we introduced new files on the ishcd. So in the export folder, you have Oracle data pump export parameter file. In import folder, you have 3 files. So you have ishmetrics user SQL script. So you need to execute that before you will do an import of Oracle to the Oracle of metric database, because this script will create the metrics database and grant necessary permissions for successful import. You have Oracle data pump import parameter file, and you have ish metrics finalize writes SQL script, and you need to execute it to revoke extra privileges that you granted for import process. It is also important to mention that the metrics database must be exported and imported alongside the content manager database from the same InfoShare deployment source. And this process ensures that the referential integrity between both databases remains the same because a metric storage relies on the objects defined in the content manager database. And for Microsoft SQL Server, you can use a backup and restore feature of SQL Management Studio to do the same process. So let's continue with metrics updates. So we received a set of customer SRQs that are related to synchronization errors with metric storage. And after investigation, it turned out that the main issue is misconfiguration when metric service is not using the proper database schema version underneath. And that actually means that metrics database was not upgraded properly. So what we did as part of 15.3 release, added a functionality to the metric service to validate database schema version on the startup. We are caching this version to avoid performance issues and using it during each request to the metric service. So, and in case of misconfiguration happened for the customer, metric service will report 503 error back to the background task that will trigger a retry for the metrics background tasks, and it's also logged. Some customers, they are having certain automation in place. As an example, like short-living publication outputs or short-living publications or their versions. And such automation creates a load for synchronization for the metrics background task that at the end, this background task and this synchronization process doesn't contribute anything to the metrics chart. To reduce the number of reported warnings because of automated temporary object creation, we added a 24 hours delay for all metrics iDelete and iWrite plugins. And additionally, we also changed the return error code for the metrics service when the service is trying to delete an object that does not exist. So before we were returning for 04 that was producing an error in the events. Now we return 200. We are doing faster cleanup of the metrics events. So succeeded metrics events are removed after 24 hours. This change helps keep the event logs more manageable and improve system performance, especially for the cases when all events types are retrieved. And cleanup is done using the regular content manager database maintenance job, and this 24 hours interval is configurable. So let's continue with standardized legacy data. So we continue investments to remove and standardize legacy data in our product. So a bit of background. So when you are creating a publication in Tridion Docs, it will give a right security setting of that folder where you created the publication, and the baseline, which is implicitly created alongside the publication version, doesn't have security setting. However, that was not always the case. In older versions of the product that didn't have publication object, security setting was set on the baseline. So this security setting is redundant, and as part of upgrade process to Tridion Docs 15.3 3 version is removed by database upgrade tool. They also updated business code for the baseline create. So if write access is explicitly set using the API 2.5 baseline create method, then we will skip this security setting. In this way, we are not introducing a backward compatibility break. We received a customer SRQ where the issue was with a preview, compare, and restore of revisions. And the problem was in the format of revision IDs that had a forward slash, a colon, and a space. And in older versions, they were allowed. However, in REST API world, usage of these characters is discouraged and requires special handling. So during the upgrade process to Tridion Docs 15.3 version, database upgrade tool retrieves the list of IDs with problematic characters and replaces them with dash. Let me cover each deploy releases as part of 15.3. So we released each deploy 3.1.6. So let me do a bit of a let me introduce a bit of background for you to understand the reason of this change. So before we implemented a modern authentication, we were using certificate for encryption in two places: for signing tokens in the legacy STS application, and a certificate that was used as a service reference and used by WCF. With introduction of modern authentication in 15.0 version, it is not required anymore to encrypt on the service layer. So, however, the WEG config file for OpenAD WCF endpoint, as you can see in this example, was still having a node for certificate. And this certificate could cause issues during certificate rollover that you need to do from time to time. For example, that can be an issue when a new certificate is missing in certificate store. And since encryption on the service layer is not required anymore, we updated each deploy commandlet to remove service certificate. So if you will run this commandlet, that is what you will get as a result. And it can be used, so this new version of each deploy, it can be used starting from 15.0 version, and it reduces certificate rollover effort by eliminating one configuration location. We also released each deploy 3.1.7 that will be as part of the each CD for 15.3 version. So let me cover changes for that version. So to support the configuration change for translation organizer that I was mentioning before during the presentation, we updated the set each service translation organizer commandlet to support this new request timeout parameter. A bit of background. You already mentioned about this one, and I encourage you to attend a dedicated bootcamp session related to collective spaces and organized space to learn more about this change. But draft space and review space are not using private XAPI anymore, but using public Tridion Docs OpenAPI. And configuration that was used by collective spaces and previously was part of the XAPI web config file, it was migrated to separate files. And to support this migration, set ish fonto schema experience commandlet was updated to handle this new files location. And the new location is used only if the version of the product is 15.3. So you can safely use this version of each deploy on the previous versions of the product. So Fonto services endpoints are now configured in upsetting JSON file for Tridion Docs OpenAPI, as you also mentioned before. It's also a result of change and removal of XAPI. Previously, these endpoints were configured in the XAPI webconfig file. So corresponding Fonto services commandlets are updated to reflect this change, and these commandlets are setting the port for each Fonto service. So for Fonto review, Fonto content quality, and Fonto document history. Update for getIsh component commandlet. So getIsh component was throwing exceptions when ish deploy component state file existed but was empty. And that might be the cause of faulted initialization during installation process, or it might be because of the previous operation was interrupted before the file could be written. So code of the commandlet was adapted to use the default state if the current ish deploy state file doesn't exist or empty. Let's continue with ish remote. So we released a new version of ish remote. It supports PowerShell 7.6.0 that is built on .NET 10, and it also has built-in MCP server. So more details about new remote you can get either from community blog or release notes on the GitHub, and I encourage you to attend a dedicated bootcamp session to learn more about new ish remote. Let's also talk about security and quality. So we continue to comply with the highest AWS Stage 2 security policy, which includes fixing or mitigating static code analysis issues of P2 high or above. And for software composition analysis, it doesn't allow vulnerability with severity P2 high or above. So when your builds are green according to security policy that is set, you are receiving a Veracode verified badge, and Tridion Docs is Veracode verified standard and publicly listed on RWS group. Let me also cover and present you community ideas that we deliver as part of 15.3 release. So, and I also encourage you to attend other bootcamps where you can see these community ideas in action. So, in context of 15.2 release, we shipped updated translation management feature, and customers like that and value all the improvements that we made, but also suggested more to simplify the configuration. So many customers work with only one source language and a single translation template, and these are now automatically pre-selected in the translation job wizard. Because a large number of customers exclude images from translation, the image option is now unselected by default in translation job creation wizard, simplifying the configuration process. And for situations when the default size of the translation job wizard is insufficient, we introduced an option to expand it to a full screen for a more comfortable working area. And this was mentioned earlier before, so we changed the format for the export file name. This, as I mentioned, this simplifies integration with the custom external translation management solutions. So more ideas were incorporated in in-browser publication editor. So indication that baseline is frozen what was asked on the community and is added to the baseline view and version panel. A highly voted request to enable filtering in the baseline view is added as a default feature for publication editor, where you can use column filters or type to filter. Customers were asking for possibility to add multiple publication resources in one go. And this is now possible with resources view in publication editor. There are also community ideas that enhanced draft space and review space. So we added, as I mentioned earlier today, we added annotation management privilege that gives a granular control over the annotation review process for customers. And yeah, review space continues to provide an in-context environment for retrieving final documents, for reviewing, final documents, and for customers who rely on conditional content. Review space now supports displaying it through a configuration option that is off by default, enabling teams to tailor the review experience. We also saw a lot of interaction and requests around Oxygen AI positron in our community that before was enabled for experimentation purposes, and now all actions that are applicable to a single topic are verified to be compatible with Tridion Docs integration and are enabled in the user interface. So we would like to say thank you to our community for such a great improvement to the product. We also encourage you to continue your contribution as well. I would like to thank you everyone who also was encouraging our customers to post ideas on the community portal. So please continue doing so. This brings the benefit to the product, makes it better, and makes our customer happy. And this is for a reference. So this is an overview of all features that are available as part of 15.3 release: publication editor, organized space, collective spaces, review space, client tools, delivery platform, and API. And with this, I would like to thank you for joining our Content Manager and OpenAPI Bootcamp.